Welcome to PTSD 911 Presents. My name is Conrad Weaver. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the program. We bring you these programs on a fairly regular basis as a part of our effort to spread the word about first responders and to encourage first responders. So this podcast is for first responders and for those who support first responders. And so if you are a first responder, first of all, thank you. Thank you for your work, for serving your community. And if you are watching us on our YouTube channel, please leave a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And then if you find this content valuable for you and helpful, leave a comment and leave a review, and then share it with your tribe. We really want to get the word out about this program and about the upcoming documentary that is in production, PTSD 911, the documentary. I am also the director of that film. We are diligently working to get this film done and in the can, so to speak, so that we can present it to the world. And we would love for you to participate with us in the film by supporting us financially. So this program, the PTSD 911 Presents, and the documentary film is all supported by your contributions. And so if you can make a contribution toward that, there is a link in the show notes or in the comments below. Please make a contribution for whatever amount you feel you can do, whether it's $10 or $100 or $1,000. We would love to have your contributions to be able to continue to bring you these programs and to continue to work on the documentary film. We cannot do this without your support. So thank you for that. And for so many of you who have already made a contribution, we thank you for that, for those contributions. And if you have not yet made a contribution, please consider what you can give today. It's very important that we have that support so that we can continue to bring these programs and to finish the film as we go on. Today, my guest is Jason Kern. He began his career in public safety in 1991 and is currently serving as the executive director of the Southeast Emergency Communications in Crystal Lake, Illinois. Jason is also the current president of the Association of Public Safety Communication Officials, or APCO as it's commonly called. Jason, welcome to PTSD 911 Presents.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So tell me a little bit about how you got your start in public safety and why.
Going back into high school and early on to college, I got into the fire service, and in college I got into emergency medical services on campus as something to do. It seemed fun. And, really I wanted a stepping stone. And back in the early 90s, the stepping stone to a career in the fire service or the police service was to become a dispatcher. So I found a local community college that was seeking dispatchers and went to work there. And I'd say pretty quick, I found a passion and a love for that side of the public safety. And it's become a career. I've dabbled in the fire side, 10 years as an EMT, 10 years as a part-time police officer, but since 1993, I've been working in the public safety communications field and doing 911. And, I've told my friends and my family, many who years have not understood why I do what I do or exactly what I do. But when I stop enjoying the work that I'm doing, I'll go find something else to do. And at this point, I'm still enjoying it.
I guess, why do you think anyone is really drawn into a career in public service, whether it's on the communication side or responding to emergencies out in the field?
I think it can be varied. I know early on going through interviews for different jobs, it was the canned, I want to do this to help people. And that truly was it. I had a desire to give back to the community and to the people with a skill set that I learned. And I found that I worked well under pressure. Both as an EMT and then on the police side, and definitely sitting in a closed little bubble, if you will, and answering 911 calls and working through it. It became almost second nature very, very quickly for me. So, what drew me into it or what gets people into that, I think a lot of it may be because your parents said, don't do that, or you don't want to do that. You want to go be something else. So we have to be a little bit rebellious. I mean, I'm finding that with my 18-year-old is as much as we're trying to steer him clear from this industry, all of a sudden we find him diving straight into wanting to go into the public safety or the public services. but it takes a special breed, and the generations have definitely changed over the years. So it's been interesting to kind of watch the profession adapt in some regards to it.
So speaking of changes, what has changed over the years in communications specifically?
I think two things that I'll note. I think first is the technology is just rapidly accelerating, sometimes faster than we can keep up, both financially and training wise. It's just the next. Whenever you look, there's something else that's come out that's meant or intended to try to help the job that we do, or the first responders, the other first responders that are actually out in the field. The second thing I think is the how the rest of public safety and how the public looks at public safety communications now. And we often were, and we're still classified as clerical by the federal government. But when you truly look at the work we do, it's the furthest thing from clerical. We're really the first people that somebody in their worst moments have contact with.
What still needs to change in your field?
There's a lot of gaps. There's some centers that are extremely progressive, and there are some that are just hanging on by a thread, whether it be financially, whether it be staffing, whether it be the training side of things. So I think it's important to try to close that gap and to help those that are maybe the haves and the have-nots to try to get them a little bit closer to each other. Like I said, it's somebody's worst day when they call 911 or when they request the police or fire department, and we need to be on our A game. So we need to make sure we train and, we debrief on things and, try to be as best as we can, as great as we can.
Mm-hmm. How has training changed over the years from the time when you first got into this business? What's different now than what it was back then?
There is very specific job training for public safety communications now. When I first got on the job, you would go to training classes with police officers or firefighters in a subject matter that was specific to them, but they tried to bring the dispatchers into it to make them feel part of it. And now there is very specific training from, just your entry level, a public safety telecommunicator certification, to communication training officer certifications, to communication center supervisor certifications. So our industry, and specifically with APCO, we're training the individuals. We're creating standards with subject matter experts that will train individuals across the country on a very even platform. And I think that's been a tremendous change for us, and it's helped us kind of advance our career. And I think really kind of justify, like I said, when I started in the 90s, it was a stepping stone. You were a dispatcher for a few years, then you went to be a police officer, a firefighter. You talk to a lot of chiefs now, or command staff in police and fire, and you'll probably hear them say, I used to be a dispatcher for a few years, and I really admire what you do. I couldn't do it again. But now you don't necessarily.
Do you think that's different, that it's not quite as much of a stepping stone anymore, as people are going directly into, fire or EMS or police, and then going directly into dispatch for that career?
Yeah, I think it definitely has changed. I think there's more people going directly into the field they want. We still do see some individuals. We've had some at my center that they've come in for a few years because they weren't sure. They wanted to kind of get the feel for the profession and see if they wanted to. We've had some that have decided to test and have been extremely successful as police officers and fire medics. We've had some that said, I really enjoy what I do, or I'm not really sure I want to be out there, especially with the way the world is today. And it's just safer for me or for my family to be here and still give. And they've done that. So it's a constant movement, and we always have to watch how our next generation or how our next group of employees are, and we have to adapt to it because if we don't adapt to it, I think we'll be lost very quickly.
So for the uninitiated and for maybe civilians like myself, what's a typical day like in the day of an emergency communicator?
I think like many things, it's every day is different. You have your calls that are very standard, but we'll find our public safety telecommunicators work 8, 10, 12-hour shifts often. And, with the staffing situation that we have across this country right now, they're often working a lot of overtime, some voluntary, some not voluntary. But you're taking the phone calls and you just don't know what you're going to answer. Even if it's not a 911 call, if you grab a non-emergency number, it may be somebody that's grabbed a number from Google and they've dialed that way and they've got your dispatch center on a 10-digit non-emergency number, but they have a fire in their house. Or, you may have somebody that's called 911 because there's a stray dog that looks threatening in their backyard. So there's no rhyme or reason sometimes to the calls. And when you sit here, I think in the past year, probably across the United States, we've answered 240 million 911 calls. And not one of them is the same. And when we start answering those, I think we get a little conditioned to answering those calls. So I can say in my 29, 30 years dispatching and being in the roles that I am, and now being in the administrative or the management role, but still listening to the calls on a regular basis, you hear things and you're like, well, that's really not that much of an emergency. But yeah, it is. It is. If my 80-year-old mom had a call, it's absolutely, that's an emergency for her. For me, that's handled thousands of phone calls over the year. It's just, okay, I know how to do this. And I'm a little bit calm. And I think that's the calm voice in the dark that people need.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the stressors that impact 911 professionals?
I think sometimes not taking things personal. When people call, they're often in a heightened sense of stress, and sometimes they'll say things or they'll just phrase things in a way where at times a dispatcher may take it to heart a little bit, and they weren't attacking that dispatcher. They're just very stressed in the situation. I think is you take a heart attack right now and you've just given CPR for 6 minutes, and then you hang up the phone, you take a sip of water, and then you go grab a phone call on a rollover accident. And then 10 minutes later, you're taking a loose dog call. You bounce from call to call to call as a dispatcher, and you don't really get that closure. And I think sometimes for some individuals, and not all, but for some individuals, I think having the closure of what happened on that call kind of helps pacify them and reduce some of the stressors and make them kind of validate the job that they're doing. So I think that's pretty important for them to kind of understand that.
So what's been a typical response for an agency as a whole when there's been a critical incident?
I think it's varied. And I don't want that to be my answer, but you see a lot of different dispatch centers, and some are sheriff run. A lot of them are sheriff run. A lot of them are police run. And then you have a lot that are fire run. And then you have certain ones specific, my agency here, SEECOM, where we're our own governmental agency. So we're not directly under the umbrella of a police chief, a fire chief, or a sheriff. And, not speaking negatively to any of those, quite honestly, sometimes they have significant resources. But on the larger incidents, we look at it from a couple, different aspects of, if our agency is going to do some sort of debriefing, we'll definitely have that communication. I'll have that communication with the chief, and we'll see if we can partner up. And we partnered up on the call. We took the call. We dispatched the police and fire. We all had various stress or, challenges with that call. So let's all debrief together and try to figure out how it went and kind of share some notes. There are times where we won't necessarily do that, and we'll just do it independently, or it may take a little while. A fire department, sometimes they work shifts, so that shift may not be back for another 3 days. We may not want to wait 3 days for our staffing, or maybe they're going on some days off, so we'll do something a little bit quicker. We've called in. On certain instances, we've borrowed a chaplain from one of our agencies and had them come in just to have a conversation with some staff, more as a voluntary, but to be available as they come offline or take a break and just have a conversation, especially I think when you get into some of your calls involving children. Many of us that are parents, but even non-parents, those calls that are, involve children really stick with you. So those are the ones we really try to highlight. But we count on our supervisors as well, because I don't think anyone knows what's going on in the room, but that supervisor does, or the partners, the teammates know. And sometimes we'll get a call from them of, hey, we took this call, didn't think it was much, but it's really kind of impacting so-and-so. Maybe they have a personal connection to it, or they had a similar instance in their life. So we'll be like, oh, okay, thanks for the call. And let's work on something here to help them through the process.
Mm-hmm. As an industry as a whole, is it typical for dispatchers, 911 professionals to not be included in critical incident debriefings or is that typical, or is it not?
I would say 10 years ago, it was not typical, at least in my experiences and in the area that I was in. But it was changing at that time. And now I would say it is fairly common. And I would say it's probably unusual for us not to be included, or at least have a reach out from an agency to, whether they're actually doing a stress debriefing or just a critical incident review and walking through the timeline of what went well, what didn't. We'll kind of hit both of those, but they are often calling us and we are participating as much as we can. So I think that threshold and maybe even that stigma has been broken in what I've seen.
Mm-hmm. So there's a story that I heard from one dispatcher who's now retired, but she said that she was involved in a critical incident and it was very traumatic, and it really took her down a dark path after this. And all the officers who were involved, it was a police involved shooting. One of the officers got shot, and they all got together and they had resources provided for them. But she was told, "You're a civilian, you'll be fine," and was kind of kept out of that. And I find that just preposterous. That someone would think just because you're a civilian, you're not in an official, part of the police force, that you're going to be fine.
And there still is that, and I think those are the have-nots. Whether it be the training side, whether it be the recognition side, there's just so many components where we should be, and that's where on the APCO side we continue to advocate for public safety communication, for these public safety telecommunicators to make sure they're part of this piece. I mean, it's a family, it's a group. You really can't have the fire department successfully go out and put out a structure fire or go out and save a life on a CPR save. Just this morning on our midnight shift, we helped deliver a baby on the phone that may not have been successful if they had to call a hospital or drive to the hospital. They had to call 911. We went through a very regimented set of instructions that we're highly trained in doing, and the paramedics that are highly trained got there, and it was a very successful event. You often cannot do one without the other, and I think that's what we continue to push. And you'll find, and I consider myself older school, but I've had some pretty good mentors in my life that have had me check myself a little bit and kind of realize that maybe I don't need the recognition. Maybe I don't always need to talk things out, but just because I don't need to do that, it doesn't mean the other 30 or 40 people that I work with, may have a different set of needs. And, as I work with the chiefs that I work with have been absolutely fantastic in trying to incorporate and really recognize the dispatchers. But we know around the country that's not the case. And I think as time goes on and as we have some turnover and we continue to advocate and bring things into the forefront, we'll slowly chip away at that, hopefully faster than slow. But
So I was on the APCO website today, and I noticed something called EMD. So for the uninitiated, what is EMD and why is it important?
So EMD is emergency medical dispatch, and so APCO has an emergency medical dispatch product, as does some other companies, and some agencies are able to develop their own. And really what emergency medical dispatch is it provides instructions. We are instructed and taught and trained how to use a set of guide cards for a wide range of medical emergencies that you may have. So if you are allergic to bees and you're out working in your yard and you're stung and you call us, we have a set of instructions that'll walk us through how to do that. And possibly, not only are we instructing you or the caller on how to do things, but we're also updating those first responders, the police officers, the paramedics, the fire department that may be coming out as well, as to what's going on, so they know. It could be a choking instance, a heart attack, the childbirth that I just mentioned. While everybody's pretty good at doing a YouTube video, I don't think when somebody calls, you have time to go to a YouTube video. You go through these guide cards and you ask the specific questions. And then it kind of guides you along as to, okay, I need you to position somebody on the ground. Let's check for breathing. Let's go ahead and start chest compression. Send somebody for an AED. Do they have an EpiPen? Are they choking on some food? How best to do that at a restaurant? And we've seen some really successful saves. And in many parts of the country, we're a mix of suburban and some little bit more rural areas here. So we can have an ambulance in certain parts of our jurisdiction, which is about 100 square miles. We could have an ambulance in one of our cities there in 2-3 minutes. And then another part, maybe 15 minutes, depending on, how far they need to go, or is the farm well marked, or where out on the farm are they going? So in that time, which is an absolute eternity for the caller, even the 2 or 3 minutes, if you're calling and you're waiting, it's where are they? Why aren't they here? Or why are you asking questions? Well, while we're asking questions, it's great teamwork. We're putting information in a computer. It's going to the responders. They can see what exactly is being done and what the issue is. We're walking you through some steps. But we need to, constantly reassure people. And we do something neat at our agency. And definitely wasn't my idea. I found it at another agency, but it's called a Wall of Life. And it's one of those, as I understand, the workforce and the different generations and the younger generations, or just the needs of different individuals, we created a Wall of Life. And for every successful CPR save or childbirth or like an airway obstruction that we clear, and somebody walks out of the hospital, really has a second chance at life. We have a nice board on our walkway as any Cub Scout tour, as any chief of police comes in, any one of our agency members come in. It's right outside the glass wall for our employees to look at. But since 2016, when we started this, we've had 26 saves where somebody, in essence, really shouldn't be here any longer. And we've provided them another opportunity in life. And we've been part of it. It's not just us, but the instructions we gave through that AMD product has allowed the people to get the CPR started, then the medics to get there and take them to the hospital, and just that continuum of care. And I think that's pretty neat. And I think that's where maybe we were clerical in 1990s when I started this, but we are not clerical anymore by providing those kind of life-saving instructions.
That's going to be very rewarding to see that on the wall, and to know that you were a part of saving someone's life and giving them another chance.
Yeah. And I've been at this agency since 2015. So 7 years, a little over 7 years. But to see that my staff has been a part of, and these are just the ones we know, but to be part of over 20 life-saving events for almost a 30-year career. I mean, one makes all the difference in the world and makes us worth it, and kind of revitalizes, and let's go on to the next day and let's do something, different. So.
So APCO is an international organization, from what I understand. How is emergency communications the same or different in other places around the world compared to the U.S.?
I think you see a lot of similarities. 911 may be different. It may not be the same number in different parts of Europe or elsewhere, but there's still that inherent need that somebody needs help. They're going to call a number to get the police or fire department to come and resolve a medical need, a fire need, or a law enforcement intervention. So we all need training, and I really think is what your documentary is doing, and we're talking about PTSD, and we're talking about the wellness of individuals. I think we start at the grassroots, and I think that training is important. If we put the tools in the toolbox for our public safety telecommunicators, that has to take some stress out of the way for them, and that has to provide them the opportunities to be a little bit more successful than somebody that just doesn't have that. So I think it's important to to kind of start there, and to try to train and try to get everybody on a kind of a similar playing field and go forward. And I think you're finding that across the world, not just across the United States, as they want the same thing. You need reliable communications. You need to be able to have that radio communication so you can inform the individual that the baby that's being delivered is now breech. Maybe they send somebody else out from a different station now that has more expertise, or we had an incident a number of years ago where I don't know if it was a 5-year-old, but it was a very young child that exhibited all signs of a stroke, according to our emergency medical dispatch cards. And the 911 dispatcher that was on the phone relayed that information to the paramedics, and it turned a light bulb in. One, they're like, you're crazy. There's no way a 5-year-old's having a stroke. But two, okay, why did they say this? Let's look at it completely differently. And it was what we call a load and go. They grabbed the kid, they put the child in the ambulance, and they rushed to a hospital that specifically deals with some stroke issues. And sure enough, it was a stroke event. Wow. And because of that, I mean, critical minutes were saved.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's things like that just across the, all over the globe, everybody wants and expects the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And of course, in some places you have your emergency response systems aren't quite as sophisticated as what we have here. And I know, even watching some of my friends in Ukraine that are responding to some of the things over there, they and look at their trucks that are going out on fires, and it's like, wow, that's like, old school.
Right.
And so we're very fortunate here. So you kind of answered my question, my next question. How has APCO responded to the growing awareness and the toll that your work has taken on the mental health of 911 professionals?
We're a member-driven organization. So APCO has a little over 36,000 members, and everybody has some different needs. But within the last few years, we've really heard, the wellness and the health is very important in our industry, and that's become kind of a paramount focus for us. And Margie Moulin, who was the president prior, had really gotten this idea and talked to us on the executive committee that we wanted to form a committee, which we call the Health and Wellness Committee, to really kind of deep dive and examine the issue and maybe what the potential solutions are or what the tools are that we can provide. So we have a Health and Wellness Committee that is looking at different things, and we have them looking at training on a pretty regular basis and some monthly correspondence to our membership. They are putting out different items, and it could be today an item about yoga. Tomorrow it could be something about eating a little bit better. Instead of me running to McDonald's in between meetings, maybe I pack something and have some fruit with it, and just little things like that. We sit for 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Are there some exercises we can do? I can tell you most of the times when I walk into the center to see my staff several times throughout the day, somebody's walking. They'll have different walking challenges with step challenges to walk around the console. Occasionally you walk in and they're having a planking challenge. That's a little bit, I turn around and walk out then. I'm not sure what's going on there. But so this committee is looking at the different things and trying to provide some different ideas. And, maybe the planking challenge to me, I think, is the silliest thing in the world, but there may be another center where this is just the greatest thing in the world, and it's helpful. And not only does it provide the health and the wellness, but it provides some teamwork. So I think this committee is looking at a lot of that. They're at our conference this year. There's actually going to be a track of health and wellness classes or training sessions throughout our multiple day event. So it's really kind of coming into the forefront. And I think the other thing out of this is, like I said, training. A lot of people maybe won't think training is part of health and wellness, but if you don't provide that foundation, I think things start to crumble. You have to look at the physical health. You have to look at the mental health. The calls that we deal with every single day for all these years really does take a toll on everybody. You have to look at the financial health of individuals too, and you need to provide tools to help them, because if people start if they're not, just like the training, if you can help them with certain things with maybe a deferred compensation plan or a 401k or help them with their retirement in terms of just explaining it to them so they understand some things. I think that provides some financial health, because if people are running check to check or they owe some money or they've defaulted on a loan, that causes a lot of stress in their head. And then do they bring that stress into the workplace? Are they no longer a viable teammate? Do they have more opportunities to have an error on a call? So I think it all comes together as a package. And I think the last piece is, as we've seen, the pandemic has been a huge mental, nobody knows, we'll have arguments in the center as to who's watching what channel and what bit of information are they going to believe. But along with with the pandemic that we've had, we've had some significant civil unrest and some significant conversation on really diversity and equity and inclusion. And that's something else that APCO's looking at. And we've beta tested it, and we're about to unveil a diversity, equity, and inclusion training course that not only looks at the individual, but looks at the institution, looks I don't think you can necessarily come into a center and teach one person about diversity and equity and inclusion. I think you need to make it a culture. And just as that person that may have the the stressors for other things at home, the financial issues or things, if you have a center that doesn't have that right culture and, there's just divides that are there or perceptions that are there, the more we can teach a center on how to kind of grow as a team and work through those challenges, I think makes a stronger 911 center. It sets it forward for the future generations. If we make that stand now, then the next people come in. This is the expectation. It's no longer a we'll get there. It's we're already here. And again, when people can focus on the 911 calls and the radio calls that are coming in from their police officers and their fire medics, that's where our focus needs to be. So if we can take care of the rest of the things out here and focus them here, I think it makes us a better profession.
So how, as a leader, as a team leader, perhaps even as a leader of your specific group in a 911 center, how can you really convince team members to work on their health, not only their physical health, but their mental health? Recently, I was at a conference and speaking to a 911 dispatcher who said that, I sit there all night on the night shift and I drink Cokes all night. And that has, made me gain so much weight. And she recognized that as a problem. But how do you, kind of tactfully work with people that you see going down a habit like that and help them to realize that this is perhaps not a good thing to do?
There's a lot of very individual approaches to this. And I think what fits for us and fits for our agency here at SEECOM and a lot of other agencies that I've worked at is when you have a supervisor on the floor, they're kind of I would say SEECOM in our agency is a family. But each shift is a little bit tighter because they work with each other on a regular basis and they know things. I find a lot of peer pressure maybe of, hey, I'm doing this walking challenge. Why don't you do this walking challenge? Hey, we're going to go do this virtual 5K that Illinois APCO is sponsoring. Why don't we all do it as a shift? And then maybe we can go get breakfast afterwards and do things like that. I find a lot of, the teamwork and the sense of family between the individuals. And I think that's very important. There are instances that I've seen where you may have an individual that's really kind of going down a slippery slope. And we may see it from a physical side. We may see it from a quality assurance side, where all of a sudden they're really just slipping. They're not the normal performance isn't there. So, with our quality insurance program and the quality assurance that's going on across this country, I think you can have a little bit of an earlier intervention into what's going on with somebody. And often I think that may be, either a personal stressor at home, a mental health incident that's, come to light now or has happened recently, and we can go down that road. It's a very challenging approach as a manager and as a supervisor to figure out exactly how tactfully to have that conversation with someone. But we try to train our supervisors and our management team, through different processes and different training events to kind of understand that a little bit more, and also to try to figure out how to have those difficult conversations.
So and we talked a little bit about this, you have a major conference coming up this year. What are some of your priorities for the conference, and what do you hope that it delivers to those who attend?
Last year was great to get back in person, but I think a lot of people still were not able to travel, with the pandemic still going on in 2021. We really provide a great value both in training and I think networking. Networking is so important. And we find ourselves now on Zoom call after Zoom call. And, you're bouncing from the call. There's no additional conversation. And I think the networking side to finding the subject matter experts across the country, I may not have a lot of knowledge in one topic, but I can certainly, I know through my years of going to these conferences and engaging with individuals, both after classes and talking and asking questions and like, wow, they have some similar thought processes as I do, or wow, that's a great program they have at their center. Let me go talk to them and get some ideas, or maybe I can even get a draft outline of what they've done. I think that's very important. There's a social side to it too. And, I think that leads to greater mental health is just being able to unplug. We do a lot of training in-house here, but we really value conferences like this, to sending employees to conferences like this and others, to just let them unplug, see other people around the country that do the same thing they do, share the stories, find people that have different opinions and outlooks, and maybe make themselves better from that. So I think the educational side is extremely important for us, but I think that mentoring and just kind of showing them what we're looking at in the future for the membership is going to be a great tool here.
Mm-hmm. And I want to say personally, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to make a short presentation at the conference this year. So looking forward to that.
I'm glad you reached out, and I'm glad we can accommodate that. So I really look forward to hearing about this and seeing this documentary come to fruition.
So what would you like the general public to know about 911 professionals?
I think 911 professionals are an extremely dedicated and rare breed of individuals that most people will never see or hear. I think now with YouTube and the news and TikTok, you tend to hear maybe a few more phone calls. I'm not sure if the public really is ready to hear all those phone calls. You could go through an officer-involved shooting, or you could go through a heart attack or a significant car accident. And we may have 5 or 6 or 10 of those in our career, but in a search engine here, the general public can go and listen to hundreds of them, and I think that creates some challenges for just the mental health of everybody. But we have a very unique, hardworking breed that answers millions of phone calls a year. And provides a very high level of service to send the police, the fire, and EMS, and anybody else that's needed in a very critical time. And a lot of thanks and a lot of praise are given to these individuals, probably not enough. I think something as simple as the recognition from the federal government, from the Office of Management and Budget, that we are not clerical, we are not taxi cab dispatchers. We are, very high trained first responders, but we operate, from a central location. We don't go into the field to impact things. So I'd really like to see that changed.
So finally, I want you to speak to that dispatcher who's sitting in the chair and they're kind of suffering in their thoughts and contemplating some dark things because of the things that they've experienced, the stressors that they've had. What would you say to that person?
I think the most important thing is you need to find an outlet. You need to find somebody to talk to. You need to find something to do to focus on those thoughts and figure out what's best. And I think in most situations, the career is a salvageable career. We just need to be involved, and we need to figure out how best to get them back in the right train of thought, the right mind, the right training. So they can go and be successful every day. And there are some that maybe have just had a long career or had so many significant incidents coupled with other things in their life that this isn't a career for them. But I think that the stigma of not talking to people, the stigma of not sharing the things that we deal with, the stigma of not going home and having a cry when you have a bad incident, I think those need to go away. The police officers do it, the firefighters do it. And I think we need to do it, and we need to support each other.
So is there anything else that is important to you that we didn't talk about today?
I think this is very, very near and dear to my heart. The previous president had really formed our Health and Wellness Committee, and I didn't feel that it was in my best interest to come out and form another committee of my own just to put my name on it. I felt so strongly that health and wellness is something that we should be focusing on, that I want to drive the executive committee and the board of directors at APCO to really assist this committee in being successful and giving us a product, for our membership and for the industry. So that's where our drive and our focus is right now, and for the remainder of my term here through August.
So I just had another kind of idea, a question that popped in my head. So pardon me for that. What's the future look like for 911 professionals?
I think it continues to become more technical. I think it continues to be more demanding. I think we need to continue to think outside of the box in how we utilize the technology and how we staff our centers, and how we in how we train our individuals and how we take care of them. It is once the text messages and once the videos from crime scenes or accident scenes start coming in, it brings a whole nother dynamic to our industry, and we need to train for that. We need to prepare for that, and I think we always need to be one step ahead, and that's why I enjoy the conferences and things like that, because you can really see there are some very proactive people and proactive individuals in this industry, and I love seeing what they're doing and trying to figure out how I can also be one step ahead, both for my agency and the agencies I support, and overall for the industry. But it's moving fast, and we need to try to stay up with it.
Mm-hmm. So final question, I promise. What's something you do to take care of yourself?
And probably not enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's these last few years, both between being a director of a 911 center, being the president of APCO International, being a husband and being a father, not a lot of time. Mm-hmm. But we like traveling as a family, and I love being out on my motorcycle, and that's kind of my de-stress moment. Mm-hmm. As I can get on the bike and maybe listen to some music, or just listen to the wind and look at the farms as I drive by. And sometimes I'll be gone for an hour. Sometimes I'll call my wife from another state and say I'll be home much later, or I'll be home tomorrow. But that's what I found over the years has been my ability to kind of decompress and kind of refocus. And everybody has something different, but that's mine, and I enjoy it.
You need to get yourself a 911 biker club together. With the vests and all that,
There you go. I'll let you know.
Yeah. Well, Jason, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today here on PTSD 911. I really appreciate that and appreciate the work that you do. Thank you for your service to your community and to the 911 community as a whole. I really appreciate the work you're doing, and especially the work in mental health and wellness in your organization.
Well, thank you. I look forward to this documentary, and I look forward to seeing you in August.
Thank you for joining us today on PTSD 911 Presents, and thank you for listening and watching our program. And be sure to subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or here on YouTube. Really appreciate that. And if this content has been helpful for you, please share it with someone else who may benefit from watching or listening to this content. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, be well, take care of yourself, and I'll see you soon.